Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the delay. My name is Laura, and I am currently a social media intern with the Starfish Foundation. It took a little while, but we're very excited to be here and excited to bring you the content that we have for today. Um, there might be another couple members joining us eventually due to our technical difficulties, so please remain patient as we figure that out. As you probably already know, the theme of our webinar is community service and education, which are two things that are very important to Starfish, and that we are really, really hoping you will be able to connect to and learn something about today. So now I am happy to present Mr. Nick Esposito, our guest speaker. Nick Esposito is currently a teacher and currently taking classes at the University of Pennsylvania. And he's done loads to help kids experience community service and figure out how to like community service more themselves, how to like and how rather than think of it as an obligation, help them think of it as something that they enjoy doing. So, Nick, thank you very much for talking with us.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here today, mainly because the Starfish Foundation has been very important to me for a number of years now. I went to college with Beth Awalt, one of the co-founders of Starfish, and when I wanted to start my own nonprofit to do exactly what Laura was saying, I actually sought out, hello, I sought out Beth and the Starfish Foundation for a few pointers on how to, start the nonprofit process, how to really engage with my students. And so I really do love the Starfish Foundation, so I'm really happy that I got to be a part of this today. Beyond being a teacher and being a student, I am also the executive director of a little nonprofit called the Service League. And the idea here is that we want to empower students through service. So when Laura talked to me about mixing education and community service, that is by far and away my true passion and the core of the work that we do at the Service League, and that's the same type of mission that the Starfish Foundation has. So today we're going to talk about that. I'm going to try to screen share with all of you. I'm new to this, so tell me if you can see what I'm about to put up. Hold on. All right, can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Can you see me now, though?
Yeah. No, it's just.
We can't see you. We can see the PowerPoint.
Perfect. Okay, so now I can make funny faces while I talk. So, the Starfish Foundation, the Service League, and today we're going to talk about education and community service. So, the first thing that we need to do when we're, developing the scope of this conversation, I think we should at least define the words that we're talking about. So, the first word, obviously, is education. And depending on who you talk to, whether it's an organization, your parents, even your school, the difference in definition that you might be dealing with could be very wide. Some people have different purposes for education, and they think that education are different things. So to make it easier, to make our definition easier and easier to understand, we should try to maybe perhaps define education in terms of what would education be like if it were successful. So if you're a student and you wanted to think, what do I want to get out of my educational experience? What is it, right? And it could be different for you and different for me. So possibilities are, well, purpose of education is to get good grades. Maybe it's to go out and get a job. Maybe it's to one day go to college, or one day just have fun at school with your friends. Maybe it's like because you're seeking out some sort of fulfillment. Maybe your parents want you to, but develop some sort of enhanced social skills, right? Or sometimes, and probably the most basic definition is, people will say, well, the purpose of education is to learn. Now, education, that definition is pretty tough to quantify, but it is a good definition. So if you would put all of those things together, maybe we're starting to get on the right track for our conversation today. But the problem here is, in our society, when we have a limited number of resources, and we talk about education, what happens when education is not successful for everyone? So what happens then, right? You have people who will ultimately feel angry, they'll feel frustrated, and ultimately members of our society are going to be left behind. And it all can be traced back to education. So therefore, we then develop this extra, part of what we do, which we call community service. And the idea of community service is to help others who need it, right? As easy of a definition as we can have. So you've got your definition of education, and the idea for community service is to help people in our society with opportunities that we didn't get, or they didn't get. So our conversation today is very simple. This is what I was told to talk about, which is how are education and community service linked? Okay, that's our definition. And if by the end of this talk we have not answered this question, then tell me, and we will start over. But hopefully we will. And in order to explain this, I am a big history nut. Even though I teach math and I teach language arts right now, I love history. So I wanted to go back in time a little bit just for an example that might illustrate my point pretty good. Okay, so we're going to travel all the way back to the 1700s, specifically 1743, and there's this guy named Dr. Archibald Spencer. He looks pretty funny in that picture, but his occupation was a scientific showman. So he loved doing science experiments in his laboratory, but what he found was that all of his science experiments were really entertaining. He delved into a lot of really cool things, but specifically he loved electricity, and specifically static electricity. So what he would do is he would have these really cool experiments where he could go to an audience member and he could make their hair stand up, or he could make them touch hands and they would shock each other. He was really able to manipulate static electricity. But in the summer of 1743, he was traveling in Boston, Massachusetts, where somebody in his audience was so enamored by these experiments that he ended up making it one of his life's passions, and from there ended up changing the world. And that, of course, was Benjamin Franklin. And Benjamin Franklin saw Dr. Archibald Spencer. He saw all these really cool shows, but for whatever reason, he was just so into it. And then from this passion developed into an obsession, and he ended up making all sorts of experiments. This is Ben Franklin's letters, in which he put a lot of his electricity experiments in. It's really cool stuff to read the rest of them. But Benjamin Franklin loved electricity. Now, he had I think a better, more philanthropic heart than Dr. Archibald Spencer, because Dr. Spencer wanted to make money off of the science. But that didn't set right with Benjamin Franklin. The prevailing hypothesis at the time was that there were two types of electricities in the world. There was static electricity that Dr. Spencer liked, and then there was also, of course, lightning. And everybody thought that these were two separate things. Dr. Ben Franklin, though, thought that they were, in fact, one and the same. So in order to figure out what the answer was to this hypothesis, he started studying, and he studied, and he studied for years and years. And then June of 1752, he did, of course, his famous key and kite flight experiment, where he attached a brass key to the base of the kite and then ran a brass wire down the string of the kite. This is not exactly an accurate photo, but he had a contraption which would ultimately ground the lightning. Obviously, if you've ever taken a science class in middle school, you know that the lightning would strike the key, the electricity would then shoot down the wire into the ground, and he would be able to harness lightning. And by harnessing lightning, he would be able to study it and hopefully prove that static electricity and lightning were one and the same, and then have the same properties. The experiment works. Okay, he's a great, innovator, and he's able to harness lightning. One of the first people in the world that's ever been able to do it. But unlike Dr. Spencer, Ben Franklin thought to himself, "What can I do to take this knowledge and then ultimately help the rest of the world?" And this experiment, it was a really cool story, but it's only as important as the next step. And the next step that he takes is inventing the lightning rod. And on the left you see the lightning rods of a modern day city, but I gave a rudimentary drawing that I did of what a lightning rod is. We put lightning rods near buildings that hopefully, like the key, will conduct or attract the lightning, which would then shoot the lightning down into the ground, right? The purpose of this is that if it hits the lightning rod, it won't hit the house. And if it doesn't hit the house, then the house won't ignite on fire, and then that fire won't spread from house to house within the city. His invention dramatically reduced the number of city fires that happened in the colonies. It helped the cities immensely. His experiment ended up getting passed over to Europe, where they started using lightning rods, and as you can see, we use them still today. So, what did Dr. Benjamin Franklin teach us about all of this? Like, what is the point of this little story? The idea is this, okay? He took education. He was learning from Dr. Spencer, okay? He was learning from Dr. Spencer, and then from there, he took that education and he latched onto one thing that Dr. Spencer taught him, and that developed a certain curiosity. From that curiosity, he started doing a little bit more research, and that developed into an obsession. And I call a nice way of saying you're obsessed is really you're just passionate, right? So you've got this passion now. From that passion, what teachers are hoping from their students is that you take what they learn, you're curious about it, you develop a passion for it, and then ultimately you become a self-driven learner, where they don't need to be even a part of the experience, where that you're going to go out and then start learning on your own about that topic, right? From the self-driven learning, you then start doing your own experiments, thinking to yourself outside the box. Well, what happens if this would happen, or what about that? And then from there, you can start to think, like Benjamin Franklin did, where does the experiment turn into an impact, right? And the idea is that you want to help as many people as you can, and Benjamin Franklin teaches us this. So what we learn from Ben Franklin in this story is that community service and education aren't linked. They are, in fact, one and the same. You can't have education without teaching advanced citizenship and a desire to help others within your community. But you also can't teach community service or community volunteerism without being educated, right? So there's both sides to it. You can't make an impact without knowing something, and you can't know something without making an impact. So you really got to make sure that they're working together. Now, this sounds very complicated. It would be really tough and really mean of me if I just gave you this list of steps to do without giving you maybe a tool to potentially help you along the way. Now, a student of mine on a recent service trip that I've gone on ended up calling what I'm about to show you, called it the Trifecta. Okay. Now, the Trifecta is a horse racing term for if you were betting on a horse race and you predicted first, second, and third place correctly. With that said, in order to have this impact that we were talking about here, you need to have all of them in place at the right time. So what we call the Trifecta, it's the nexus or the meeting point between your greatest passion, your greatest talent, and where they meet the world's greatest need, or your world's greatest need. So as we're going through this, maybe get a piece of paper out, make a list of all the things you're passionate about, all the things you're talented, and then from there start brainstorming how can you use those two things to impact the world. Now, that's easy to say, but we're going to go through each one of these things and just talk about, well, what would happen if we didn't have it, and what would it look like? So, number one is passion. And my example here is, let's say that you are a really good person and you want to go out and do some sort of community service. You like your grandmom, right? You always like going to her house and you always find it fun. So you think to yourself, well, my grandmom's old and I want to do community service, so maybe if I mix those two things, I will serve at a retirement home. And you want to go play with the old people, maybe play some checkers with them or help them out, read to them, what have you. But let's say you get there and you realize that you couldn't care less about what you were reading, or checkers was really boring to you, and you're just really not passionate about your work. You thought it was a good idea, but ultimately it's not really what gets you going. You did it because you thought it would be a good thing. But here's the thing. If you are not passionate, or if you don't want to be there, the old people can tell. And soon after they tell this, they're going to think to themselves, I don't want to spend the little time that I have left with this person who definitely doesn't want to be here, right? They're going to want to go move on to someone who's a little bit happier and cheerful than you. So my point being is, without the passion, you're not going to be as effective. It's the passion that really drives you forward when things get tough. So if you want to make a big impact, you need to have the passion. Number two, and I think most important, you need to have the skills to be able to make your impact. Example number two: if you were someone who loves basketball, okay, you love it, and your plan is, all right, well, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to go out and I'm going to be a basketball player, and I'm going to train really, really hard as I can, and I want to go to the NBA, and then they're going to give me a lot of money, and then ultimately I'm going to use that money to then start a camp where urban students who don't have a lot of money are going to be able to learn about how to play basketball, and they're all going to be happy and fulfilled and whatnot. None of that works if you can't play basketball, right? You can't. If that's your plan, you need to be good at basketball. So I always picture myself who can't play basketball. That would not be my thing, right? You got to make sure that you make a list of all of your talents, not just some of them, so that you don't think, well, I've got to play basketball because that's my passion. And Nick Esposito told me, well, I got to go after my passion. But if you aren't good at it, then we as a society would like to tell you, go do something else, something that you're good at, because that's where you are going to make your unique impact on the world. And then finally, you got to mix it with the world's greatest need. And that's tough to do, and you got to think outside the box, and you got to think to yourself, is this something that needs to be saved or needs to be helped? And then am I excited about helping it? I can tell you that lack of water in certain regions of the world is a very important issue, or I could tell you that pollution is very damaging to our ecosystems. But honestly, as much as I think those are bad issues or bad problems, that doesn't get me going. I'm not really excited about either of those issues. With that said, I hope that someone else is so that they can solve it. But I know that for me, I'm going to be into something else. But I also know that I need to, harness my talents, mix it with those passions, and then brainstorm where the world's greatest need is. We call it the trifecta. You got to figure it out for yourself. So I didn't want to crowd you too much, but that's where I'm going to leave you before we get to any questions or just open it up to a conversation. But what Ben Franklin teaches us is that you use education to then fuel your passions, let you know what your talents are, and education also teaches you what you're bad at, which is really a good thing. And then from there, you use this to become a self-driven learner, and then from self-driven learning, you will then become someone who has the potential to make an impact. So I'm going to switch over to my face now, so don't laugh. But questions?
All right. Well, first of all, I was wondering, I'm sorry you did not get a chance to introduce yourself at the beginning. I was wondering if our other member of Starfish would like to say hello.
Sure.
Oh, hi, Nick. By the way, thank you so much for coming up to the webinar, and it was really interesting. It was super interesting. I was really hooked onto it. My name's Samia, by the way, and I'm one of the interns for the Starfish Foundation. So it was really interesting to hear what you had to say. So thank you so much for that.
Perfect.
I'm currently a student at UW, and I knew Beth through Hobie, and that's how I got to know her. And then I found out about the Starfish Foundation, and then Laura told me all about you and everything that you do, and I was really excited to be able to talk to you and have the conversation. So thank you.
Very cool. So I figured we could spend the next few minutes. We can have a conversation about it. You can ask me the questions that you already have, but I figured we could talk.
For sure. I really liked, especially the way you connected all three together. So it was kind of like a process from education all the way to the impact and what falls in between that as well. Laura, did you have any questions, or did you want to ask questions that people had before?
I was gonna do those ones first, if that's okay. The other people's questions first. So one of the questions that was asked to Nick was, what is your motivation and favorite reason to volunteer? So I guess this connects a little bit to what you were teaching us about. So how would you define that for yourself?
So when I was about your age, I guess younger than you, I was a sophomore going into junior year of high school, and I was one of those kids that didn't like talking to anyone. I was always kind of sad and honestly, like a little bit lonely. I just didn't have any super close friends. My mom ended up forcing me to go on a service trip where I went to inner city Trenton, New Jersey, and I got to work with a bunch of different types of people, and I had learned all sorts of lessons about community service and social justice problems, and I realized that other people had bigger problems than I did, And for whatever reason, that week, those connections that I made, both with the people in my group and also with the material and the thoughts, it just like lit me up comparatively to anything I've ever had before. And I just figured, whatever you do with your life, you've got to chase that feeling. So I think that's my motivation for volunteering. And I think if anything, with Starfish Foundation or the Service League, whatever we do, it's just making programs to get the kids to have that feeling too.
That's awesome. All right, I'm gonna read the second one,
Sure.
and then we can get through more. So the second one. So when we were promoting the webinar, we said specifically that you had led service trips with Habitat for Humanity and Give Kids the World, among many other service trips that you have been a part of. So why particularly did you choose Habitat for Humanity and Give Kids the World? These were with high school students, by the way, for a little bit of context.
Yep. So Habitat for Humanity, I've been on, God now, this next year I'll end up getting over 20 Habitat trips. So I'm very excited in my lifetime. Habitat for Humanity is a great organization, mostly because the people that you end up working with are great people. But I think most importantly, they are an established organization that have a lot of resources and they have a really good cause. And if you're going to teach anybody about community service, Habitat for Humanity is a great, I don't want to say gateway drug, but it's like a gateway volunteer drug where it's like give them just a little bit of a taste of what it's like to help somebody. And Habitat for Humanity, it's a really easy lesson to teach kids. Like, look, before we got here, there was no house. By the end of the week, there is a house, and it's very easy to see. And they have such great resources, and it's such an established group that you can focus mostly on helping the students and not worrying about how to actually organize the actual event. That's one thing. If you are ever in the area of Orlando, Florida, and are going to Disney World or Harry Potter World, please go to Give Kids the World, which is an organization that partners with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and it's a resort that is just for all of the kids whose wish was to go to Disney World, and it's obviously the most popular wish, and it's a magical place. It's got castles everywhere. The kids live in their own villas. They can order ice cream whenever they want. Go pick up pizza any time of the day. I know one of the nights, like all of the girls that were in our group got to dress up as princesses to pretend like they were, princesses for the kids as they had a little parade. It is a magical place. It's about 15 minutes away from Magic Kingdom. It's a great place. Equally, it's a different type of service, and we've gone there because it's awesome, but mostly because it is an established organization as well, where they have the ability to really hammer home what the lessons you want to get across as a leader.
All right, and just for our last pre-submitted question,
Sure.
How do you personally get young people excited about community service? And what suggestions do you have any suggestions for other educators who are trying to get their students more involved in community service as well?
So, great question. So you said in the introduction, I'm taking classes at Penn right now, and one of my theses, or whatever you want to call it, theses, is going to be centered around that question exactly. It's like, how can we get young people invested into community service? And I think sometimes we think of community service as extra, but I hope what I tried to hammer through in our little talk just a few minutes ago is that they are linked, and they should be linked and not something extra when you have extra time or extra money. Because many of our young people, they don't have money. Their parents might have money, but they personally don't. So they don't have a lot of money to give. And as all of you know, you guys are busy as students, whether it's high school or college, So it's tough to find time to go out and do extra volunteer work. So you've got to be really creative about it. How to get kids excited? I think you get kids excited just because they already have the passion that's there. You just need to harness it and put it in the right direction. I was kind of upset because I'm up in Philadelphia now, but I used to teach at Lara's school in Baltimore, and it broke my heart watching the Baltimore riots. And from the Baltimore riots, I saw some students of mine and my friends going out and doing the rioting, but then there was also a group of students that, without even thinking about it, went out and did peaceful protests and were cleaning up the city. So there is that capacity there. But at the same time, everybody would flock to Facebook and flock to Twitter, and they were just screaming about how upset they are about the issues that are going on, about police brutality or race relations or Caitlyn Jenner. You know, like there's so many things that have gone on within even the last few months that people are so upset about and invested in that they just go on Facebook and they just scream out into the void. I guess what we should try to do is take that energy and focus it on something productive. Because that is there. It is good to be upset about things. You got to turn that into some sort of impact. So how to do that? It's not that hard. You just got to give them the outlet to talk about it. I remember the first time that we did this experience, this service experience through Laura's school. I gave the presentation, and only 12 kids signed up. And then the second year, because they had so much fun on the first year, we had, I think, close to 80 kids sign up the second year, and it was insane to a point where I didn't have enough capacity for all of those kids. The kids just want to be with their friends. They want to do something good. They want to feel good. So I don't think it should be that hard because the kids have a lot of passion, energy, and whatnot. But we should really concentrate on doing that, I think.
That's awesome. Just to tag on to the end there,
Sure.
I do know that as a kid who has been inspired into community service, I think another thing that really motivates me is when I can see adults be unironically enthusiastic about community service, which is why I love the service trip and why I love the Starfish Foundation, because there's so many people who are so excited and so willing to go there, and so that's what made a difference for me. And to even if I wasn't sure about getting this excited or getting this involved in something, being able to see a person that I respected do that as well was what made the difference for me.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that to go along with that, because I think when we talk about community service, we think, oh, you got to go Habitat for Humanity, you got to go Give Kids the World, you got to go to your soup kitchen. But I think what we should really train all of our students to do is community service doesn't have to be in sacrifice of your future. Like, you don't have to give up everything in your life, give up making a good salary or taking care of your family in order to go build houses for Habitat every week. You know, you don't need to do that. Well, like if Laura really likes science, right, and you want to become a scientist, all you have to do is then think, how can I mix science with some sort of good, you know? And I think helping students get that, like that excitement that you were just talking about, how do you channel that into something that you really like and that you're going to make money on? And that's important. Those jobs are out there, and sometimes people don't link that up in their head, and they think you have to choose one or the other, and you don't. You really don't.
All right, that's awesome. Anything else you would like to add, Soumya?
I had a question based on like something that you touched upon when you were talking. You were talking about social media as an outlet that people use often to talk about something that they're passionate about. And did I just freeze?
Yes, you just froze. There you are. You're back.
Okay. So I was saying that something that you touched upon when you were talking about social media being an outlet that people usually express, their anger out on or how they're feeling. And so, do you think that social media can be useful in somehow, like it can relate to community service in some way? And if so, like how can you do that?
Yes. So I don't want to give too much away, but through the Penn program, we are starting a venture, an idea of some sort of social media app that talks directly to what you're talking about. Because I think what happens is, and I've seen so many friends where they'll put like a political post up, or they'll say something about something that they're really passionate about, whether it's something about the Baltimore riots or Ferguson or Charleston, and they'll say something. Now, some of it might be correct, but there could be like a counter argument. And ultimately, the conversation that you will have on Facebook is usually not the type of conversation you want to have with the end in mind, right? You're kind of just going to start yelling at people, and I always see like how it starts very civil at the top of the conversation, and by the end of the comments, it gets really like bited, and you're fighting about something that you don't really want to. So I do think social media is an awesome thing, and I think that we should that's why I'm trying to. We're going to try to develop a social media, platform where kids could go. Kids, I mean everybody, could go on and talk about a real issue under the umbrella of respect and education. Like, you're going to be educated when you come to the table and talk about it. You're not just going to, use your 143 characters and just say what you can. Like, it takes more than that. It takes more of a conversation. And then from there, somehow use this social media platform to unite those people to make an impact of some sort. Like, I don't know, like, let's get together, and now that we've thought about this, let's actually go and, do a project or raise money for something or something like that. I think social media is great in many ways, but to your point, I think the strength of social media is that it's the strength of the youth, right? And I think the youth have a lot to offer that older people don't have through social media, right? Like, that could be their being able to connect people and rally people, powerful stuff, and I think they just need to use it the right way. So it's a great question. That's the other part of the thesis, is how can we use that?
Awesome. I actually just wanted to touch on one last thing. Also, kind of relating back to yourself, I had this question in mind. What do you feel that your passion, talent, and like what you feel is the strongest need, how does that connect to your life?
Whew, that's tough. I don't know, actually. It's funny because it's constantly changing, and I wish you could just like nail it down and that be it. I remember when I was just about to graduate, I was my undergrad degree was in journalism and media production, and I had all the intention in the world to be a sports broadcaster. That was where I did my internships, and I had a job at the Philadelphia affiliate of ESPN Radio, and I was like very excited to like take that step in my life. And then I realized, I was like, okay, so I've got the passion there, and not to brag, but I was not too bad at it, so I had the talent there, and it's like, where does that impact the world? And that's where I was having a tough time my senior year of college. And then I was just like, okay, fine, can't do that. So then I decided, all right, well, maybe I'll go be a teacher for a little while. And it ended up, when I was planning on doing it for 2 years, I'm now about to start my 5th year. So talents-wise, I'm not exactly sure. I think maybe going to Laura's point, like just having enthusiasm and a smile about it might be the only thing that or the number one thing that I try to bring to the table. The passion definitely is community service, but it's about youth and the community service. I want kids to be able to make their own difference that's unique to them, that they care about, because you want them to feel fulfilled. And then the world's greatest need, I guess, and I've just discovered this recently, and this is why it's a good question, is everybody talks constantly, and if you guys have heard of the achievement gap, the idea that like certain schools that are maybe underperforming have poor, based off your zip code, you might have worse academic gains. I think an equally pressing issue in our society right now is not necessarily the achievement gap, but the empowerment gap, and like how kids don't feel like they either should or can do anything to impact either their own life or their own community, right? Like, I think, so I saw a quote, it's like, kids need to realize that they are architects of the world that they want to live in the future, and I think that's my world's greatest need. And somehow I guess my passion and talent should try to mix into that, but I'm working on it.
I think it already has. I mean, you're with the work that you're doing with the youth and the community service. It seems like it.
Uh-oh.
All right. So if this is okay for the rest of the webinar, we can talk a little bit about Starfish, and then do you want to do the prizes after that, and then we can wrap it up?
Sure.
Okay. Soumya, did you want to talk about the Starfish Foundation, or I can?
We can kind of, I guess, tag team on it, and if I like miss anything, then surely be sure to fill in. But the Starfish Foundation really, like I said, or what we talked about before, it really touches on education, community service in many ways. And you can really see the intersection of that, because the Starfish Foundation really aims to empower students in Ecuador through education. And so they provide scholarships and they provide mentoring programs so that they can have a better education and therefore build a better future for themselves. So the kind of like what you said with the empowerment gap, how kids need to realize that they're the future, and whatever they do, then that's going to affect the future. So definitely the scholars at the Starfish Foundation really understand that, and they've taken their education and their life into their own hands, and they try to work towards better education so they can have a better life for themselves. And so they work in their community and in their education to be better. So Starfish really works on programs that work with those students. Laura, if you want to talk more about it.
Sure. So to start, I'm going to read an intern who unfortunately could not be with us. Zainab has written a really awesome little piece that I want to read to you and share with everybody watching. The Starfish Foundation all began as an idea. The idea was driven with a passion. Education is the key to success, it's always said. But what we must now focus on is starting from the education part and building a strong foundation. With a strong educational foundation, success is possible. The Starfish Foundation is unique in the way that it understands the importance and the value of building a strong base of education so that the world may have future farmers and doctors and environmentalists and more. No problem in this world can be solved without having well-educated students from around the world. There is a uniqueness to every region of this world, and with students that have a strong educational base and understanding of their community, they understand how to better their community and eventually the world. It takes a village to raise a child. This simple common quote is often a reference for showcasing the work that goes into raising a child and how a child is part of the different values from the community. But this quote also shows the importance of community. If community works hard to help a child grow, develop, and be successful, then the child has the duty to give back to the community. The Starfish vision is to build this community where children have the opportunity to continue their education and are empowered to create a better future for themselves and their community. So thank you very much for those words. I think that all that you summed up just now was awesome. I will just say, if anybody happens to be watching this and has not liked the Starfish Foundation on Facebook, you can go do that. Look up the Starfish Foundation and click like. Our website is thestarfishchange.org, where you can learn a lot about our programs and how, if maybe you were inspired by Nick's talk and you would maybe like to think about helping out, you can learn more about how to have an internship or maybe even visit Ecuador and work with some of our programs there. So that's all I have to say for right now.
Also, just a shout out to our Twitter. We're also at the Starfish Change, and then our Tumblr account is also the Starfish Change. So that's also that for everyone out there. For the prizes, I think we'd have to check who's watching. Maybe after we hang up, we could still check that out. I'm not exactly sure how we'd check.
Yeah, I can see the viewers here, but I can't see who the viewers are.
Okay.
But we just have the people who have signed up. Those are the names that we have. So.
Okay. So maybe if you're tuning into this webinar, we could have them email thestarfishchange@gmail.com. So if you guys are watching, please email us your name and at thestarfishchange@gmail.com, and then we'll randomly choose for prizes.
And feel free to give any comments you have, any follow-up questions, the favorite thing you learned, anything you want to talk to us about. And then we will shortly after post you, if you would like, on social media saying congratulations, and we will also send you an email saying that.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds perfect. So we'll be able to view the viewers after this, and then we'll go from there.
Perfect.
All right. So I'm very quickly going to try to thank everybody. I'm probably going to forget people. Please add people if I forget people. Thank you to Jen and Beth, the co-founders of Starfish, and for Julia, who our communications manager. All of them have been really helpful in providing us with all of the tools to get started and the tools to make this. Also, thank you to the other 2 interns on our team, Amy and Zainab, who were not unfortunately able to be here, but who still put in a lot of time and thought into making this webinar happen, which is awesome. And thank you also to the other people in our very long chains of emails, John and Jane. Thank you to Samia for being here. And thank you most of all to Nick Esposito. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us
No
and
problem.
for sharing your wisdom with us. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope that our viewers have as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, just a special shout out to all our viewers watching. Thank you so much. Also, a shout out to my dad who's in the other room watching the webinar right now. So thanks for the support. And thank you, Nick, so much for being here. It was a really great presentation. I definitely took some screenshots, so hopefully we can post those up at some point.
Oh, great.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you so much. It was super interesting. Very, very interesting presentation.
All right.
Learned a lot.
Perfect.
Yeah. Hope to be in touch with you soon then.
Please.
All right.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much. Thanks to all our viewers.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.